For 10 years, Sarah had loved Liam. It wasn't the kind of fleeting love born from infatuation, but a deep, enduring feeling that had grown stronger with time. She had met him in college, when they were both young and idealistic, full of dreams and promises of what their lives could be. Their connection had been instant, an unspoken understanding between them that made her believe in soulmates. Sarah could still remember the day she first realized she was in love with him. They had been sitting by the lake near campus, the sun setting behind them as they talked about everything and nothing. Liam had laughed at something she said, and in that moment, as the light danced across his face, Sarah had felt it, the overwhelming certainty that she wanted to spend the rest of her life by his side. But there had always been something standing in their way. First, it was their studies, then their careers. Life seemed to keep pulling them in different directions, but no matter how far apart they drifted, Sarah's love for Liam never wavered. He had become her best friend, the person she trusted more than anyone else in the world. But despite the closeness of their friendship, Liam had never made a move beyond that. Sarah had told herself that it didn't matter, that just being near him was enough. Yet deep down, she had always hoped that one day, he would look at her the way she looked at him. 10 years passed, and Sarah's love remained constant. They had both grown older, more experienced, their lives taking different turns, but their bond remained unbreakable. Sarah had watched as Liam dated other women, her heart aching each time he introduced someone new. She had been there to pick up the pieces when those relationships ended, always waiting in the wings, hoping that one day he would realize what had been in front of him all along. But then everything changed. It had been an ordinary evening when Liam called her, his voice tense and nervous, something she wasn't used to hearing from him. He had asked if they could meet at their favorite spot, the little cafe they had frequented for years. Sarah agreed, sensing that something important was weighing on him. When she arrived, Liam was already there, sitting at their usual table by the window. His hands were clasped tightly in front of him, his expression distant. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she approached, her mind racing with possibilities. Maybe this was it. Maybe he had finally realized that he loved her too. But when Liam looked up at her, his eyes were filled with something she couldn't quite place. Fear maybe, or regret. "Sarah," he began, his voice quiet, "there's something I need to tell you." She sat down across from him, her hands trembling slightly as she waited for him to continue. "I've been keeping something from you," Liam said, his eyes flickering with emotion. "For years I've wanted to tell you, but I didn't know how. I didn't want to hurt you." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. This wasn't how she had imagined their conversation would go. "Liam, what is it? You can tell me anything." He took a deep breath, his gaze dropping to the table. "I know how much you care about me, Sarah. I've always known. And I care about you too, more than I've ever been able to say. But there's something you need to know before we can move forward." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. She had spent years imagining all the different ways he might confess his feelings for her, but nothing could have prepared her for what he said next. "I'm married." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and devastating. Sarah blinked, certain she had misheard him. "Married?" she echoed, her voice barely a whisper. Liam nodded, his expression full of pain. "I've been married for 5 years. We don't live together, and it's complicated. But legally, we're still married. I've wanted to tell you for so long, but I didn't know how." Sarah's world spun. Married? How could he have kept something like this from her for so long? The man she had loved for 10 years had been hiding a life she knew nothing about. Her mind raced with questions, but all she could manage was a broken, "Why didn't you tell me?" Liam's face was full of regret as he ran a hand through his hair. "I was scared, Sarah. Scared of losing you. Scared that if you knew the truth, you wouldn't look at me the same way. I didn't want to hurt you. But I know I've hurt you anyway by keeping this from you." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as the weight of his confession settled over her. The man she had trusted with her heart had been living a lie, and now the future she had always dreamed of seemed to shatter before her eyes. Is she still in your life?" Sarah asked, her voice barely holding together. Liam hesitated, and that hesitation told Sarah everything she needed to know. "We're not together in the way you think," he explained. "Our marriage was more of a convenience. We were young and things got complicated. We've been separated for a long time, but the divorce hasn't been finalized. I didn't want to get into it with you until I knew it was over for good." Sarah's hands trembled as she wiped away the tears that had begun to fall. "But you should have told me, Liam. I've been here waiting, loving you for years, and you've been married." Liam reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers gently, but she pulled her hand away. The pain was too raw, too fresh. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said softly. "I've loved you for so long, Sarah. I just didn't know how to fix things." His words cut through her like a knife. He had loved her all this time? It was what she had wanted to hear for so many years, but now it felt like the cruelest thing he could say. Sarah stood up, unable to sit any longer, the weight of his betrayal crushing her. "I need time, Liam. I need to think." Liam stood too, his eyes pleading with her. "Please don't walk away from me, Sarah. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to get the divorce, and I'll do whatever it takes to make things right between us." But Sarah shook her head, her heart breaking as she looked at the man she had loved for so long. "You should have told me sooner," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I deserved the truth." And with that, she turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving behind the love she had held onto for a decade, unsure if she could ever forgive him or herself for the years she had lost. For the first time in 10 years, Sarah didn't know what her future looked like, and that uncertainty was both terrifying and liberating. As Sarah walked out of the cafe, the cool evening air hit her face, but it did nothing to cool the storm of emotions raging inside her. She felt hollow, like a part of her had been ripped away, leaving an empty space where hope and love once lived. For 10 years, she had built her life around the idea of Liam, the man she had believed would one day be hers. Now that illusion had crumbled, and the weight of the truth was suffocating. Her feet carried her without thought, wandering aimlessly through the streets she had known for years, but which now felt foreign and cold. Every step seemed to echo with the lies, the lost moments, the betrayal. How could she have been so blind? How could she have spent 10 years of her life loving someone who had kept such a monumental secret? The questions circled her mind, but there were no answers. Only pain. Sarah found herself at the park where she and Liam had shared so many moments, the place where they had laughed, talked about their dreams, and where, in her heart, she had first realized she loved him. She sat down on the bench, the one they always sat on together, and the weight of everything finally crashed over her. The tears came slowly at first, but soon they poured freely, soaking her cheeks as she sobbed into her hands. She wasn't just crying for the betrayal. She was mourning the years she had lost, the moments she had sacrificed, the love she had given freely, all for a man who had been living a lie. For so long she had convinced herself that Liam was the one, that despite everything they would end up together. But now she realized she had been holding on to a fantasy that had shattered into 1,000 pieces the moment he had said the words, "I'm married." It wasn't just the lie. It was the fact that he had kept it from her for so long. Every memory, every tender moment between them, now felt tainted by the knowledge that there had been someone else, another woman, another life that Liam had never let her see. She had loved him with everything she had, and yet he had kept this enormous part of himself hidden. She didn't know how long she sat there, lost in her grief, but eventually her phone buzzed. She looked down at the screen, seeing Liam's name flash across it. Her heart clenched painfully, but she couldn't bring herself to answer. What was there left to say? He had betrayed her trust in a way she didn't know if she could forgive. And yet, despite the anger, the hurt, a part of her still loved him. That was the most painful truth of all. After everything, she still loved him. But love, she realized now, wasn't always enough. The days that followed were a blur of confusion, heartache, and isolation. Sarah tried to focus on work, on keeping her routine, but nothing felt the same. She avoided Liam's calls, ignored his texts, and withdrew from the world. How could she move forward when the past still clung to her so tightly? One evening, about a week later, there was a knock on her door. Sarah hesitated, her heart racing. She knew who it was before she even opened it. Liam stood there, looking tired and broken. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, the silence between them thick with everything they had left unsaid. "Can I come in?" he finally asked, his voice rough. Sarah stepped aside, allowing him in, but she kept her distance. She wasn't ready to forgive, wasn't sure if she ever would be. "I didn't want to tell you like that," Liam said after a long pause. His eyes were filled with regret, his hands trembling as he spoke. "But you deserve to know the truth. I should have told you years ago. I'm so sorry, Sarah. For everything." Sarah crossed her arms, trying to hold herself together as she looked at the man she had loved for so long, the man who had broken her heart. "Why didn't you?" she asked, her voice shaking with the weight of all her pent-up emotions. "Why did you let me love you all this time, knowing you were married?" Liam lowered his head, shame flickering across his face. "I was afraid. Afraid that if you knew you'd walk away from me, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing you." "You didn't give me a choice," Sarah replied, her voice rising. "You made that choice for me. You kept me in the dark, and now I don't even know if I can trust you." Tears welled in Liam's eyes, something Sarah had never seen before. "I know I messed up. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But please believe me when I say that I love you, Sarah. I've loved you for so long. My marriage, it was over long before I met you, but I didn't handle it the way I should have." Sarah shook her head, her heart aching with every word. "It doesn't change the fact that you lied to me. For years." Liam took a step closer, his voice pleading. "I'll do anything to make it right. I'm getting the divorce finalized. I'll do whatever it takes, Sarah. Please, just give me a chance to prove to you that I'm not the man who kept this from you. I love you more than anything." Sarah's chest tightened, the tears threatening to spill over again. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that things could be different, that maybe they could rebuild what had been broken. But a part of her wondered if it was too late. Could she ever truly forgive him for what he had done? Could she ever let go of the betrayal that now overshadowed every memory they had shared? "I don't know if I can," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you." Liam's face crumbled, but he didn't push her. He nodded slowly, understanding the depth of the hurt he had caused. "I'll wait," he said softly. "However long it takes, I'll wait, because I can't imagine my life without you, Sarah, and if that means giving you space, then I'll do that. But I'm not giving up on us. Not after everything." Sarah's heart broke all over again as she watched him walk toward the door. He paused, turning back to look at her one last time, his eyes filled with the same love she had always longed for. But now, that love felt too heavy, too complicated. As the door closed behind him, Sarah collapsed onto the couch, her emotions overwhelming her once more. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if she could ever let Liam back into her life. But one thing was clear. Her heart was shattered, and it would take time, maybe more time than she had, to put the pieces back together. The days that followed Liam's visit felt like an agonizing blur. Sarah couldn't shake the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her. Anger, betrayal, and a deep-rooted love all warred within her, refusing to settle. She tried to focus on work, on friends, on anything that could distract her from the ache in her chest. But no matter where she went, her thoughts returned to Liam, his confession, his lies, and the heartbreak he'd caused. Late one evening, Sarah sat alone in her apartment, staring at her phone. Liam hadn't contacted her since he left, and part of her was relieved. She needed time, space to figure out what her next move would be. Sarah couldn't shake the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her. Anger, betrayal, and a deep-rooted love all warred within her, refusing to settle. She tried to focus on work, on friends, on anything that could distract her from the ache in her chest. But no matter where she went, her thoughts returned to Liam, his confession, his lies, and the heartbreak he'd caused. Late one evening, Sarah sat alone in her apartment, staring at her phone. Liam hadn't contacted her since he left, and part of her was relieved. She needed time, space to figure out what her next move would be. But another part of her, the part that had loved him for so long, craved answers. Why had he kept such a huge secret? What was the full story of his marriage? Without thinking, Sarah opened her browser and started searching. It felt invasive, like she was betraying her own sense of ethics, but she needed to know more. Who was this woman he had been married to? What had really happened between them? After a few minutes of scrolling, she found what she was looking for, an old article from a local newspaper. It wasn't much, just a small wedding announcement from years ago. A picture of Liam, younger, smiling, arm around a beautiful woman. Her name was Julia. They looked happy. The sight of it sent a jolt through Sarah's chest. She had never seen Liam like this with another woman. The picture told a story she wasn't part of, and it hurt. But then something else caught her attention. A few comments on the article, cryptic ones. One mentioned how tragic it was that the marriage didn't last. Another hinted at some kind of scandal. Sarah's stomach twisted. What had happened? She had to know more. Over the next few days, Sarah couldn't resist digging deeper. She combed through social media accounts, forums, even reaching out to an old acquaintance who might know more about Liam's past. The more she searched, the more she uncovered a puzzle, pieces that didn't quite fit together. Then, late one night, she found it. A news article buried deep in the archives of a local paper. It was a story about an accident that involved Julia. The headline read, "Local woman in critical condition after mysterious fall." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Julia had been injured, seriously injured. The article was vague, but it described a late-night incident at the couple's home. Neighbors reported hearing raised voices, a commotion, followed by the sound of a fall. Julia had been rushed to the hospital, where she remained in critical condition for weeks. There were no charges filed, but the undertone of the article hinted at something darker. Speculation swirled about whether it was an accident or something more sinister. Sarah's mind raced. She thought back to everything Liam had told her. His vague comments about his marriage being over, the way he had skirted around the truth for so long. Was there more to the story than he had let on? Had he been hiding not just a marriage, but something far worse? She couldn't shake the unease that settled in her chest. She needed to confront him, to hear his side of the story. But the doubt gnawed at her. Could she trust him? Could she believe anything he said after all the lies? The next morning, Sarah woke up to a knock at her door. She wasn't expecting anyone, and her heart leapt to her throat. When she opened it, she found a woman standing there, a stranger, yet somehow familiar. "Are you Sarah?" the woman asked, her voice steady but strained. Sarah nodded, confused. "Yes. Who are you?" The woman gave a sad smile. "I'm Julia." Sarah froze. Julia, the woman from the wedding photo, the woman from the article, the woman Liam had been married to. "I think we need to talk," Julia said softly. They sat down in Sarah's living room, the air between them thick with tension and unspoken words. Julia looked different than she did in the pictures Sarah had found online, older, wearier. There was a sadness in her eyes, but also a resolve that made Sarah uneasy. "I'm sure Liam has told you some things," Julia began, her voice calm but edged with pain. "But I need you to hear the truth, the whole truth." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She didn't know what she was about to hear, but she had a sinking feeling that it would change everything. Julia took a deep breath. "Liam and our marriage wasn't what it seemed. On the outside, we looked perfect. We were young in love, or so I thought, but things changed after the first year. He became distant, secretive. I didn't understand it at first, but then I started to suspect he was seeing someone else. And then, that night, the night I fell." Sarah's hands tightened around the mug she was holding. "What happened?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Julia's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "We had a fight, a bad one. I confronted him about the other woman, and he denied it, of course, but I knew he wasn't being honest with me. I was angry, I wanted answers, and we argued. I don't remember everything clearly, but I fell down the stairs. It all happened so fast." Sarah's blood ran cold. Did he push you? Julia shook her head quickly. No, it wasn't like that. It was an accident. But after it happened, everything changed. We both knew our marriage was over, but I think he felt trapped, guilty, and I couldn't stay with him after that. Sarah sat back, her mind reeling. The story was heartbreaking, but it didn't absolve Liam. He had still kept this from her. He had lied, not just about his marriage, but about the deeper, darker truths that had haunted it. I don't know what he's told you, Julia continued, her voice softening. But whatever you're feeling, you deserve the truth. I came here because I don't want you to be hurt like I was. Liam is complicated, and I don't know if he'll ever truly let go of the past. Sarah felt her heart twist. She had spent so many years waiting for Liam, believing in a future that now seemed to be built on a foundation of lies. She didn't know what to believe anymore. Julia stood up, her eyes filled with sadness as she looked at Sarah. I'm not here to ruin things between you, but I thought you should know the whole story before you make any decisions about him. Take care of yourself, Sarah. Don't let him break you the way he broke me. With that, Julia left, leaving Sarah alone in the silence of her apartment, her heart pounding with confusion and fear. Sarah knew she had to confront Liam again, this time with the whole truth laid bare. But as she picked up her phone to call him, her hands shook. Could she face him after everything she had learned? Could she ever truly forgive him for the secrets he had buried? One thing was clear. Sarah's life and her future with Liam would never be the same again. Sarah's mind was spinning as she sat on the edge of her couch, staring blankly at the door Julia had just walked out of. The revelation that Julia had come to her personally, that she had shared her story of betrayal, guilt, and heartbreak, left Sarah feeling shattered. Her heart ached not just for herself but for Julia too. What Liam had hidden from both of them was worse than she'd imagined. But now, something even darker began to creep into her thoughts. A question she couldn't shake. Had Liam ever truly been the man she thought he was? Could she continue to love him after learning that he had built their entire relationship on the ashes of his broken marriage? She needed answers, and she needed them now. Without giving herself a chance to second-guess her decision, Sarah grabbed her phone and dialed Liam's number. Her fingers trembled, her heart pounding in her chest as the phone rang once, twice, and then he picked up. Sarah. Liam's voice was quiet, hesitant. He must have sensed something was wrong. We need to talk, Sarah said, her voice cold and distant, so unlike her usual self when she spoke to him. Can I come over? He asked, the tension in his voice rising. Whatever it is, we can talk about it face to face. Sarah paused, her stomach twisting. She had to confront him, but after what Julia had told her, she wasn't sure she could stand to look him in the eye. Fine, but you'd better come now. 20 minutes later, Liam stood in her doorway, looking tired and anxious. As he stepped inside, Sarah could feel the weight of everything unsaid between them. She wasted no time. I spoke to Julia, Sarah blurted out, crossing her arms tightly over her chest. Liam visibly stiffened, his face going pale. Julia? He repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. She came to see you? Yes, Sarah said, her voice growing sharper. And she told me everything, Liam. About your marriage, about the accident, about how you've been lying to me for years. Liam opened his mouth to speak, but Sarah cut him off, her anger finally bubbling to the surface. Do you have any idea how much that hurts? You let me believe in us, in some future together, all while keeping this huge part of your life hidden from me. And now I find out from her, after everything I've done for you, after all these years. Liam's eyes filled with regret, but it only made Sarah angrier. I'm sorry, he began, but she couldn't hear it anymore. You're sorry, she snapped, her voice rising. That's all you have to say? Do you even understand how much you've hurt me? How much time I've wasted loving you, waiting for you, only to find out that you've been lying this whole time? Liam took a step closer, his hands trembling as he reached out toward her. Sarah, please listen to me. It wasn't like that. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you. But you did, Sarah shouted, stepping back, her voice breaking. You hurt me more than you can even imagine. I thought you were the one, Liam. I thought you were the man I'd been waiting for, but now I don't even know who you are. The room fell into a heavy silence, the tension between them suffocating. Liam's face twisted with pain, his eyes pleading with her, but Sarah couldn't meet his gaze. "I think we're done," she said finally, her voice cold and hard, though her heart was breaking inside. "I can't do this anymore. I can't keep loving someone who lies to me. I deserve better than that." Liam's face crumbled at her words, and for a moment Sarah thought he might collapse. But instead he took a deep breath, nodding slowly as if accepting the inevitable. "I understand," he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I don't blame you for leaving me. I've made mistakes. So many mistakes. But I never stopped loving you, Sarah, not for a second." His words hit her like a punch to the gut, but she forced herself to stay strong. She had to end this, for her own sake. "I think you should go," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I need time to figure out what's next." Liam hesitated for a moment, his eyes searching hers as if hoping for a sign that things could still be salvaged. But Sarah's expression remained resolute. With a final nod, he turned and left, closing the door behind him with a quiet thud that seemed to echo in the silence. Sarah stood there for what felt like an eternity, her emotions swirling in a storm of grief, anger, and regret. She had loved Liam deeply, but the trust between them had been shattered beyond repair. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah tried to move on, though the void Liam had left in her life was impossible to ignore. She threw herself into her work, spent more time with friends, anything to keep her mind off the emptiness inside. But every time she saw his name on her phone, another missed call, another message left unread, her heart ached. One night, after a particularly long and lonely day, Sarah found herself scrolling through old photos of her and Liam. The memories of happier times felt like they belonged to a different world, a world where she still believed in the man she thought he was. Tears filled her eyes as she scrolled through picture after picture, his smile, his arms around her, the way he had once made her feel like she was the center of his universe. It was all a lie, she reminded herself, but it didn't make the pain any less real. Then, almost on impulse, she picked up her phone and called him. Her heart raced as the line rang, and she almost hung up before he answered. "Sarah?" His voice was soft, surprised but hopeful. "Can we talk?" she whispered, unsure of what she was even asking for. They met at the same park bench where they had shared so many moments, the place that now held a mix of memories, both sweet and bitter. Liam was already there when Sarah arrived, his eyes tired but full of the same longing that had once drawn her to him. "I didn't think I'd ever hear from you again," he said quietly, as she sat down beside him. Sarah didn't know where to begin, so she just stared at the ground, her heart heavy with conflicting emotions. After a long silence, she finally spoke. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you for what you did, Liam," she said, her voice trembling. "But I can't stop thinking about you, even after everything." Liam's eyes softened and he leaned closer, his voice full of regret. "I know I hurt you, Sarah, and I'll spend the rest of my life making up for it if you let me. I love you more than I've ever loved anyone. I don't deserve a second chance, but I'll do whatever it takes to earn it." Sarah looked up at him, her heart torn between the pain of the past and the love she still felt for him. Could she really trust him again? Could they rebuild what had been broken? "I don't know what the future holds," she said, her voice quiet but resolute. "But if we're going to try again, things have to change. I need honesty, I need trust, and I need to know that you're willing to fight for us, just as hard as I am." Liam nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "I'll do whatever it takes, Sarah. I won't let you down again." And for the first time in weeks, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe they could find a way back to each other after all. The crisp air of the park whispered through the leaves as Sarah sat beside Liam, the tension between them palpable, yet laced with something softer. Hope. For the first time in weeks, she let herself breathe in his presence, trying to reconcile the past with the feelings she could never quite let go of. Her heart was torn between the hurt that still lingered and the undeniable truth that, despite everything, she still loved him. Liam's gaze was steady, though his eyes betrayed the depths of his regret. He reached out, hesitating just for a second before his hand gently brushed against hers. She wanted to hold on to that warmth, but the ache of his betrayal still lingered in the corners of her heart. "I don't expect it to be easy," Liam finally said, his voice soft, breaking the silence between them. "I know I've broken your trust in the worst possible way, but Sarah, every day without you has been empty, and every time I think about what I've done, I realize more and more just how much I've lost. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I was a fool to let that slip through my fingers." His words were gentle, but they pierced her heart. Sarah looked up, meeting his eyes, and for the first time since everything fell apart, she saw something deeper there, a vulnerability, a raw honesty that made her feel like she was finally seeing him for who he truly was. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she whispered, her voice trembling with the weight of the confession. "But I've been trying to move on, and nothing feels right. It's like, no matter how hard I try, you're always there, in the back of my mind, in my heart. And I hate that you still have that power over me." Liam's hand tightened slightly around hers, his thumb brushing against her skin in a way that sent a familiar warmth through her body. "I don't want power over you, Sarah. I want to be someone you can lean on again. I want to be the man you deserve, the one who loves you fully and doesn't hide behind lies. I'll spend every day proving to you that I'm different, that I've learned from my mistakes." The sincerity in his voice stirred something deep within her. There was a part of her that had never stopped loving him, no matter how much she tried to convince herself otherwise. But love alone wasn't enough. She needed to know that he would be the man she deserved, the man who would never take her love for granted again. "Liam," Sarah's voice wavered as she spoke, "you hurt me more than I ever thought possible. I've spent nights wondering if I'll ever feel whole again. But even through all of that pain, I can't shake the love I have for you. I want to believe you've changed. I want to believe we can be happy again." Tears welled up in Liam's eyes, and he gently pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. The world around them seemed to blur as they sat there, hearts exposed, souls intertwined. For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt a flicker of hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. "I know it won't be easy," Liam whispered, his breath warm against her skin. "But I'm here. I'm here for the long haul, Sarah. I'll fight for you every single day if you'll let me. We can start slow. Rebuild this, brick by brick. I just need you to know how much I love you, how much I've always loved you." Sarah closed her eyes, letting his words wash over her. She wanted to believe him so badly, to trust again, to let herself be vulnerable in the way that only love can allow. But she wasn't sure if her heart could survive another break. "I don't know what the future holds," she whispered back, her voice soft but steady. "But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to see if we can find our way back to each other. But it has to be different this time, Liam. I need you to be honest, to be open. No more secrets." Liam nodded, his eyes filled with determination and gratitude. "I promise, Sarah. No more secrets, no more lies. Just us, moving forward together." In that moment, the weight of the past seemed to lift, just a little, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Sarah allowed herself to hope. She rested her head against Liam's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and in that simple, quiet moment, she felt a sense of peace. They weren't perfect, they were both broken in their own ways, but maybe, just maybe, they could help each other heal. As the stars began to twinkle above them, casting a gentle glow over the park, Sarah and Liam sat together, their hands intertwined, their hearts slowly mending. It would take time to rebuild trust, time to heal. But for the first time in a long while, Sarah believed that they might just have a chance. And in that fragile, tender moment, she realized something important. Love wasn't about perfection or avoiding pain. It was about choosing each other again and again, despite the flaws, despite the mistakes. It was about standing together even when things seemed impossible. And as she sat there with Liam, her heart still aching but filled with hope, Sarah knew that she was ready to take that chance. She was ready to love again, not just despite the past, but because of it.